Yep, it's happening. I'm finally going to do this. I'm going to do a deep dive into Springfield's most dysfunctional family, Homer, Marge, Bart, Lisa, and Maggie, the Simpsons. Now, I've wanted to do an episode on The Simpsons for a long time, but I keep putting it off over what a mammoth task it'll be, as there is so much trivia out there about The Simpsons. I mean, where do you even start? There could easily be 50 10 things you didn't know about The Simpsons episodes. Not to mention, there's already tons of YouTube videos about The Simpsons out there, by channels which are honestly way better than mine. But, I decided to grow a pair and do it anyway, by talking about some interesting snippets that stood out to me, while also adding my own personal experiences with the show. So you're not just getting a recycled list from web pages, but reliving it from someone who was there when the show started, aka me. So let's do this. What can possibly go wrong?
Go nuts.
Do you like that? That's pretty cool, isn't it? So today I'm mainly focusing on the Simpsons era of the 90s to early to mid 2000s, as that was my time that I watched the show. My era of the Simpsons as I grew up with them. So sit back, relax, get some donuts and a flaming mo as we check it out. Number 10. Life in Hell. So The Simpsons starts with producer James L. Brooks, who in the late 80s produced the variety show The Tracey Ullman Show. Brooks decided that he wanted to feature some animated shorts in the show, where he turned to comic book cartoonist and animator Matt Groening in order to create some animated shorts for the show, as Brooks liked Groening's comic strip Life in Hell. And Groening was originally going to make the animated shorts about his Life in Hell comic strip. But due to issues involving publication rights, he decided to make an entirely original cast of characters, where he created a dysfunctional family called the Simpsons. The name Simpsons was chosen because it sounded like simpleton, and each member of the Simpsons family were named after members of Groening's own family, with the exception of Bart, whose name was an anagram of brat. Number 9. The Strangest Family on TV. It's here we get to the iconic and standout look of The Simpsons, well known for their basic and simplistic look, as well as their yellow skin. Well, when Groening drew up a rough sketch of The Simpsons, he assumed that the characters would be fixed up by the animators, where in actual fact the animators just assumed that this is what The Simpsons looked like and went with it. But they would evolve into looking less crude and more refined later down the track. It was decided to make the characters yellow on the account that Bart, Lisa, and Maggie didn't have hairlines, so it was felt that it would look weird if they were fleshy skin colours. So, they became yellow, and Groening went along with this as he found the idea of Marge Simpson to be someone who was yellow with blue hair to be hilarious. When it came to voice casting, Dan Castellaneta was cast as Homer, and he based his Homer voice on Walter Matthau. And although Homer's voice would evolve into its own thing,
you'll have to speak up, I'm wearing a towel.
In the show's earlier days, you can really tell that he was channeling the legendary actor.
Well, good night, son.
Well, here we are, the whole family.
Come on, Bart, leap into your father's arms.
Julie Kavner was cast as Marge Simpson, and later down the track, Hank Azaria and Harry Shearer were cast as a variety of voices. Now, Nancy Cartwright was originally considered to be the voice of Lisa Simpson, but she found Bart to be more interesting, so she asked if she could audition for Bart, and so she did, and thus she got the role.
Don't have a cow, Dad.
Now, on the flip side of that coin, Yeardley Smith, who was originally considered for Bart, was now cast as Lisa. So they did something of a casting switcheroo, and thus pop cultural history was made and set in stone. Number 8. Eat My Shorts. The Simpsons, in all their weird early days of animation glory, made their debut on The Tracey Ullman Show on April the 19th, 1987, as short sketches, and it seemed to create a new intrigue and fascination from viewers. So much so, 2 years later in 1989, it was decided to take The Simpsons beyond being short sketches on a variety show, and for The Simpsons to have their very own sitcom, with the show being picked up by Fox Broadcasting Network, as well as a few other production companies, with talents on board including, but not limited to, series creator Matt Groening, James L. Brooks, creative developer Sam Simon, and series director Brad Bird, as well as an iconic theme song being composed by Danny Elfman. The very first episode made for the series was Some Enchanted Evening, but the first to be broadcast was Simpsons Roasting on Open Fire, which was broadcast on December the 17th, 1989 and presented itself as a Christmas special. I guess a Christmas special to those who had been following the sketches on the Tracy Ullman Show. And I can actually remember watching this special when it was very first broadcast on Australia, and it was a huge broadcasting event, as there was just so much hype and buzz, because I think that people just really wanted to see it and figure out just who are the Simpsons and why are they suddenly appearing everywhere, like in magazines and TV commercials, and why is everyone talking about them? But above all, why do they look so damn weird? And to be honest, when I saw Simpsons Roasting on Open Fire, I was hooked right away. I got it. Despite just being 5 years old, I think I knew what the show was all about. And yeah, I was on board. Interestingly, this episode didn't even feature the iconic intro where we zoom around a day in the life of Springfield. So I'm guessing that intro wasn't ready yet, so this really was early days. The next episode to be broadcast was Bart the Genius, nearly a month later on January the 14th, 1990. And unless I'm mistaken, apart from Simpsons Roasting on Open Fire, which was advertised as a Christmas special, when the first season was being broadcast in Australia, the first episode to be shown was The Call of the Simpsons, the one where the Simpsons get an RV, and while on a trip gone wrong, everyone thinks that Homer is Bigfoot. And apparently in 1992, when the show had really taken off, Tracy Ullman took Fox to court, claiming that because The Simpsons started on her show, she should receive profits for its success. But the case didn't go anywhere. Man, those early days of The Simpsons, they were something, weren't they? Yes, the animation looked a little rough, but I think that kind of added to its charm and made it more unique. However, the arrival of The Simpsons was not without its controversies. Number 7. Be more like the Waltons and less like The Simpsons. When Matt Groening was setting up a deal with Fox to make The Simpsons sitcom, part of the deal was for the network to not interfere creatively with The Simpsons, as Groening wanted to offer an alternative TV show to what he felt was, quote, mainstream trash. So, in other words, The Simpsons wasn't going to be like one of those safe, life is perfect family sitcoms that flooded the airwaves during the 1980s, and to be a little edgy, it was non-conventional, celebrating a family that was dysfunctional, and that made that the show's standout aspect. It was new, fresh, and rebellious. So The Simpsons was kind of like the punk movement of primetime TV viewing. Yeah, there were other shows out there also celebrating dysfunctional American families, like Married with Children and Roseanne, but The Simpsons was animated, which was quite unique, giving it a wider appeal, as well as more public intrigue. And a more adult-orientated, animated, primetime sitcom was pretty much unheard of back then. Now, we are living in a day and age of many outrageous adult comedies, like South Park and Family Guy, of which those earlier episodes of The Simpsons really seemed quite tame in comparison. But if you can believe it, back then the show was considered very shocking and controversial. Many parents, groups, and teachers were appalled with this new show and felt that it was evil and inappropriate, with some calling for it to be banned, to which some schools did ban Simpsons t-shirts, merchandise, and other paraphernalia. I can vividly remember being in my first year at school when I was 5, and at the time, all the teachers hated The Simpsons and thought that it was just so terrible and shocking. All because of one thing, yes, just one thing in particular that really rubbed them the wrong way. And that was Bart Simpson's catchphrase, "I'm Bart Simpson, who the hell are you?"
I'm Bart Simpson. Who the hell are you?
Yet they just could not get over that one sentence and thought that this was evil and the work of the devil. Yep, it seems that back in 1990, the world really wasn't ready for the sentence, "I'm Bart Simpson, who the hell are you?" In fact, I can even remember my classroom teacher telling us kids that we must never watch The Simpsons under any circumstances, even if our parents say that we can. Okay, I'm pretty sure that school teachers probably wouldn't be allowed to do that nowadays. And just when things couldn't get any worse, the power plant industry were offended because of The Simpsons' depiction of a power plant boss, Mr. Burns, who, as we all know, was shown to be evil. And the outrage caused the show's producer, Sam Simon, to issue an apology to the US Council of Energy Awareness. In fact, even George Bush Sr. spoke out against the show. Yeah, even the frickin' president himself, where during a re-election campaign, he said,
"We are going to keep on trying to strengthen the American family to make American families a lot more like the Waltons and a lot less like the Simpsons."
But you know what? All this vitriol the show went through only added more to its allure and appeal, as if it was forbidden fruit. We were told we can't have it, and yet everyone wanted it. In fact, I can still remember vividly one morning at school, we had a show and tell where all the kids were talking about what they did the night before. And one poor kid, for his show and tell, said that last night he watched The Simpsons and the teacher went nuts at him. Like, huh, how could you watch The Simpsons? What is wrong with you? You can't do that. Like, she really got stuck into this poor kid for having the audacity to watch something she doesn't approve of. And look, you know what? All those who went into a panic back in 1990 kind of look silly now, as The Simpsons did happen, and people did watch it, and it didn't bring about the apocalypse. I think that sometimes when something new comes along, which captivates the imagination of young people, to which the older people just don't get it or understand it, that does tend to lead to a panic and calls for it to be banned. Heck, it happened in the 1950s with horror comics, as well as with rock and roll icons like Elvis and the Beatles. Number 6, Bart Mania. It was in the early 90s that the popularity of The Simpsons really took off, becoming an instant pop cultural phenomenon, often referred to as Bart Mania, where Simpsons merchandise was now on huge demand, with Bart Simpson becoming the face, or be that mascot of The Simpsons merchandise, as he seemed to really resonate with everyone, which is interesting as I feel like in later years, Homer would become the face of the franchise. There were suddenly Simpsons toys, shirts, video games, and of course even a pop song co-written by Michael Jackson called Do the Bartman. And yeah, it doesn't get any more early 90s than Do the Bartman. Once again, I can remember watching Do the Bartman for the first time, when it was featured on a TV show dedicated to all the latest music videos in Australia. And no word of a lie, when I watched it for the first time, I honestly thought that Do the Bartman was the coolest thing I had ever seen. With the start of season 2, it was decided to broadcast the show the same time as The Cosby Show, which was being broadcast on NBC, with the two shows going head to head in a battle for ratings. And a lot of people thought that this would be disaster, and that there's no way The Simpsons could compete against Bill Cosby, with this battle of the ratings being dubbed as Bill versus Bart. However, the first episode of season 2, Bart Gets an F, was a huge hit and would become the Simpsons episode with the highest viewership ratings, as well as the highest watched program for Fox until a National Football League playoff in 1995. Yeah, Bart Gets an F was a huge hit for its time. Time magazine labelled The Simpsons as the best TV show of the 20th century, and The Simpsons would go on to get a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and the show would win 37 Emmy Awards. And Homer's catchphrase of "Dole" has actually become part of the English language, with it entering the Oxford Dictionary. Yeah, just like Shakespeare, The Simpsons has had an impact on language itself. And finally, in 1997, a real-life replica of the Simpsons house was built in Nevada, apparently part of a Fox and Pepsi campaign. Well, that's one heck of a campaign. Yep, The Simpsons became a pop cultural movement that would reach and appeal to a wide mass. A pop cultural phenomenon right up there with the Beatles and Star Wars. Number 5, The Springfield Files. So there are several interesting creative choices that have happened along the way in The Simpsons' early years. For example, Springfield's greatest entertainer, the questionable Krusty the Clown, was originally going to be Homer Simpson himself. The gag was Bart thinks that Homer is a loser and that Krusty is really cool, without knowing that Homer and Krusty are in fact one and the same. But it was decided to make Krusty his own character. I guess it wouldn't have worked in the long run. I mean, after so many seasons, how could Bart not have caught on that his dad is Krusty? Although that said, maybe that would have been funny. I don't know. The first time we saw Mr. Burns' personal assistant, Smithers, in the episode Homer's Odyssey, he was shown to be a black character. But this was put down to a colouring animation error, and that the production thought that it would be a bad idea to have a subservient character be a person of colour. Also in those early Simpson days, Moe had black hair, unlike his more iconic look where he had grey hair. Milhouse also had black hair, who as we all know would go on to have an iconic look of blue hair, and Barney was blonde, despite later on having brown hair. In addition to that, something else that has caused confusion in the Simpsons fanbase is why on earth does Bart Simpson have a blue shirt in the show's early merchandise? There have been all sorts of reasons given to this anomaly, like it was a way to spot out bootleg products, aka if Bart didn't have a blue shirt, then it wasn't legit, to it being an attempt to make Bart stand out from Lisa and Maggie, to merchandise companies being sent early drafts of The Simpsons, of which featured Bart in a blue shirt, and they just went along with that and thought, that's how Bart looks in the TV show. But the confusion of Bart's shirt doesn't end there, as there is still some confusion as to what colour it is. To me, it's always been orange. Yep, simply orange. However, I've had debates with others who swear that it's red. And yeah, I guess sometimes the shirt does look red. Several Simpsons characters are named after real streets in Portland, Oregon, including Flanders Street, Lovejoy Street, Quimby Street, and Burnside Street, aka Mr. Burns. And as pointed out by Digital Trends, there is also an Evergreen Terrace in Portland. Number 4, the best of The Simpsons. Viewership-wise, the heyday of The Simpsons seemed to have been between Season 1 and 4, which got viewership ratings which would range from 27 million to 22 million. According to Wikipedia, some of the best viewed episodes per season include Life on the Fast Lane, Bart Gets an F as mentioned, Colonel Homer, Lisa's First Word, Treehouse of Horror 4, Treehouse of Horror 5, and Who Shot Mr. Burns Part 2. However, what about the episodes that have the most fan admiration? Well, if you type into Google and ask what are the most popular Simpsons episodes, you're greeted with a list of episodes, with it being noted that this is a list sourced from across the web. The episodes included are Bart Sells His Soul, Homer's Enemy, Treehouse of Horror 5, Who Shot Mr. Burns Part 2, You Only Move Twice, Cape Fear, The City of New York vs. Homer, Last Exit to Springfield, and Marge vs. the Monorail. That was a great episode. However, I wanted to conduct my own investigation into the issue, so I posed the question on the Minty Comedic Arts Facebook page, and simply asked, what is your favourite episode of The Simpsons? Needless to say, I got tons of replies, and lots of these replies were Homer-centric episodes, including Homer Goes to College, Homer the Great, Deep Space Homer, King Size Homer, Homer the Heretic, and The Mysterious Voyage of Our Homer. Upon giving the responses a quick glance, a handful of episodes that seem to keep creeping up in the comments include Homer's Enemy, Marge vs. the Monorail, You Only Move Twice, and The Springfield Files. So what are the best episodes of The Simpsons? Well, it's all purely subjective, but one thing is for sure, people who follow me online sure do seem to love Homer.
Woohoo! 4-day weekend!
Some of my personal favourites include Itchy and Scratchy Land, Flaming Moe's, Bart the Daredevil, and Camp Krusty. So, clearly I'm really out of sync with what everyone else likes. Number 3, special events. So throughout the history of The Simpsons, there have been several, I guess you could say, event episodes. Ones that generate a certain buzz to get everyone talking about The Simpsons. You know, keep it relevant. One of the most memorable cases of this is the Who Shot Mr. Burns double episode, with part 1 closing off season 6 and part 2 opening up season 7, in which Springfield's least favourite resident and power plant owner Mr. Burns gets shot in an attempted murder mystery. And you know, it worked. I can remember at the time, in between episodes, everyone was talking about it, with many theories and rumours going around as to who people thought shot Mr. Burns. This event storyline was created by Matt Groening as a publicity stunt. There was even a contest where viewers could call up to try and guess who the shooter was, making the experience interactive. The prize was for the winner of the contest to be animated into an episode of The Simpsons. Now, there was kind of a kerfuffle with this contest behind the scenes, and due to contest regulations, a caller had to be selected at random for winning the contest, even if they got the answer wrong. And according to Wikipedia, the person who won the contest had the wrong answer. And the winner didn't even watch the show, nor did she want to be animated into an episode. Oh, did they randomly choose the wrong contestant or what? But seriously, why even join the contest then? So she opted for a money prize instead. Of course, the potential killer would turn out to be Maggie Simpson. However, there were alternative conclusions that would have revealed other potential residents who shot Mr. Burns, including Smithers, Barney, Moe, Apu, and Santa's little helper. Another standout episode was the season 7 episode Treehouse of Horror 6, which featured a segment called Homer Cubed, where Homer steps into another dimension, aka a plot from the Twilight Zone episode Little Girl Lost, where 3D animation was used. Although 3D animation is very common nowadays, this was huge back then, and was actually really groundbreaking. I can remember at the time the fact that The Simpsons were using computer animation even featured in a news report here in Australia. And yeah, I can remember the first time I saw it, and I thought it looked amazing and unlike anything I had previously seen. Yeah, come on, look, it was the 90s. Also, behind the scenes, the animators didn't know how to create Bart's iconic hair for 3D animation, so they got a Bart Simpson vinyl doll and used that as a reference. Then in 1997, the 8th season episode, The Springfield Files, was broadcast, which was a show crossover with The X-Files, possibly two of the biggest shows at that time. Now, yeah, The Simpsons has had more than its fair share of celebrity voice cameos, but this one just seemed to be a really big deal with everyone at the time. Once again, probably because The Simpsons and X-Files were the biggest shows of that era. Jump to the year 2000 with the episode Alone Again, Natra Diddley, in which the show actually kills off the character Maud Flanders, where at a NASCAR event, she is hit by some shirts fired out of a shirt cannon because of Homer. Although The Simpsons had previously dealt with death in the past, never before was it like this, with a character of the show that had been a big part of the series since the start. It was honestly shocking. The reason given for the character's death is the actress who voiced Maud left the show after a pay dispute. But you see, here's the thing, they did have another voice actress take over. What actually does make sense is executive producer Mike Scully claims that the reason the character was killed off was to increase ratings. I guess to create a shocking situation that's going to get everyone talking and tuning in. But without a doubt, I think the biggest Simpsons event was The Simpsons movie. Now, all throughout the 90s, there were persistent rumours of a live-action Simpsons movie. I believe at one stage I heard from somewhere that Macaulay Culkin was going to play Bart. But behind the scenes, throughout the 90s, there were actually several movie attempts. For example, there was an idea of making the episode Camp Krusty a feature movie, as well as other episodes possibly becoming a potential Simpson movie, including a fish called Selma and a Treehouse of Horror movie, and a project called Simptasia, a sort of Simpsons version of Fantasia. A Simpsons movie was greenlit in 1997, with the cast signing on in 2001, and the movie actually wouldn't come out until 2007, which once again was a big deal at that time. So here are my thoughts on the Simpsons movie. Well, no, cut, not this time. That is the story for another episode. Number 2, Crime and Punishment. Simpsons episodes may have had many triumphs, but they aren't without their controversies either, as over the years there have been the odd episode of The Simpsons that caused a bit of a stir and would end up getting banned, and some for really bizarre reasons. Some of the examples offered by Screen Rant include The Cartridge Family, which was banned in the UK over its depiction of football hooligans and positive depictions of guns. Another episode banned in the UK was Weekend at Burnsies, over its drug references and a scene of Homer being attacked by crows. Okay, sure. 20 Minutes Over Tokyo was banned in Japan for being considered too offensive to Japanese culture. Same with Blame It on Lisa, which was banned in Rio de Janeiro for its depiction of Brazil. In fact, the tourist board of Rio de Janeiro were planning to sue Fox over the episode for its negative depiction and thus potential impact on the tourism trade. However, they were told that they couldn't because of America's laws of freedom of speech. The City of New York vs. Homer Simpson, which despite being produced in 1997, would get banned post-2001 due to the 9/11 attacks, on the account that the Twin Towers were prominently shown in that episode. Be that animated versions, but still the towers nevertheless. However, restrictions on this episode would eventually ease, but edits would often be made to the episode to remove the towers. To me, the strangest episode to be banned was Cape Fear, an episode by many to be regarded as one of the greatest Simpson episodes ever, in which the episode spoofs the movie Cape Fear, where Sideshow Bob is trying to track down Bart and kill him in an act of revenge. The episode was banned in Germany thanks to showing a child in danger, as well as a character being shown to wear an SS officer's uniform. There are several more episodes that have seemingly pissed people off along the way for all sorts of reasons, proving that a huge enterprise like The Simpsons isn't free from scrutiny. Number 1. To boldly doe where no one's doed before. As it stands now, The Simpsons is the longest running sitcom of all time, even making its way to the Guinness World Records, as well as the longest running animated series. The Simpsons has now been going on for 35 seasons, consisting of 768 episodes. Although many do claim that the show isn't as great as it used to be. A term I often hear getting passed around is zombie Simpsons, in that the show is just a walking, empty shell of its former self. A show stuck on life support, which refuses to admit that it's pretty much past its prime, with a refusal to put the show to a stop. And yeah, looking at the ratings of the show, the last couple of seasons have had an average viewership rating from 2 to 1 million, which is a far cry from the earlier days, which could often bring in 20-something million. But you know what? I'm not going to bitch about modern day Simpsons. I don't watch modern day Simpsons. I tried to watch an episode here or there, but I just couldn't really get into it. So for all I know, it still might be a great and wonderful show. But my time of watching The Simpsons was definitely the 90s to early to mid 2000s. And that's all I needed to have my perfect Simpsons fix. Having The Simpsons around definitely led to a more interesting childhood, and I'm glad I got to grow up with the show. Each episode seemed to be perfectly written and carefully crafted in order to tell a great story with many comical moments. Back in the day, as soon as you saw the Simpsons logo coming out of the clouds, you knew that you were in for a treat. And for the next 20 minutes, you were going to see some wonderful, groundbreaking television. In fact, we were really lucky here in Australia, as all throughout the 90s, The Simpsons was shown on a constant loop on weeknights on Channel 10. Seriously, this network station had a thing for MASH and The Simpsons, as literally every weeknight in the 90s, without fail, you were going to be watching MASH and The Simpsons. Channel 10 was obsessed with MASH and The Simpsons. Yeah, if you grew up here at that time, you know exactly what I mean. I also love how really enthusiastic the guy was in the Australian TV promos of The Simpsons.
Tuesday, 7:30 on The Simpsons. Bart the Daredevil.
Sunday, it's Krusty's Comeback Special. Bette Midler. With more guest stars than you can poke a stick at. 7:30 Sunday on 10.
Why on earth would you want to poke a stick at them? I guess it doesn't get any more Australian than more guest stars than you can poke a stick at.
More guest stars than you can poke a stick at.
Seriously, why are we poking guest stars with sticks? Since when was that a thing? I promise you that's not a common thing that happens here. Anyway, although The Simpsons seemed to be a silly show about a dysfunctional family with wacky animation, it was actually a very intelligent show in disguise, as because the show isn't setting out to be a show about a perfect cookie-cutter family, The Simpsons could explore daring themes that the average Joe could really relate to, and do it subtly through the guise of being a light-hearted cartoon, one that actually was a reflection on the modern family. And I'm sorry, despite George Bush Sr.'s pleas, I could by far relate to The Simpsons more than I could the Waltons. But you see, here's the thing. Back in the day, everyone was offended because they thought The Simpsons was a teardown of the modern family and modern family values. But despite being a dysfunctional family, they are still very much a loving family. The Simpsons always seem to be able to resolve their problems and conflict, often through just how much this family loves each other. Behind all the quirky shenanigans and gags, this is a family that is rich with love. A family of which each member would always support one another, and by the end of each episode, still come together as a close-knit family. In fact, The Simpsons' love probably is their greatest strength. The love the family has for one another that the viewers watching will also have for this wacky family. And I think it's for this reason alone that The Simpsons has become one of the biggest pop cultural phenomenons of all time. You know, people often say to me that out of all the Simpsons characters, I remind them the most of Comic Book Store Guy. To which I have to say, yeah, you bet I'm Comic Book Store Guy! Absolutely! Despite The Simpsons supposedly being past its glory days, I'm still glad The Simpsons exist and that I got to grow up with it. And I feel extra lucky as I got to grow up with it during its heyday. And I hate to sound like old man Minty here, chasing the kids off my lawn, but I think you had to grow up with The Simpsons during its heyday to appreciate just how magical that time was. So yeah, I think that about wraps everything up. Anyway, I'm Minty, and shh.